Welcome to the second Spotlight on Ayckbourn, looking at Alan Ayckbourn's famed trilogy, The Norman Conquests. I'm the playwright's archivist, Simon Murgatroyd, and here I'll be looking at the trilogy's transfer to London's West End. Traditionally, the story of the Norman Conquests' journey to the London stage has been portrayed as relatively straightforward. Success in Scarborough leads to a production at the Greenwich Theatre, the success of which leads to a commercial and critically successful West End run. Except, it wasn't as straightforward as it seems. I've been researching the trilogy for years, and it was never a given the trilogy would automatically and triumphantly go into the West End. What has emerged and continues to emerge from the archives, as I still doubt I have the entire story, is a convoluted, improbable and occasionally lucky sequence of events which ultimately led to one of the defining West End productions of Alan Ayckbourn's career. With the help of Alan Ayckbourn and the Ayckbourn Archive, I'm going to retrace the journey of the Norman Conquests to the West End. The trilogy, not yet titled The Norman Conquests, opened on the 18th of June 1973 at the Library Theatre in Scarborough. Almost immediately, Alan's agent, Margaret Peggy Ramsey, began pressing Alan's current London producer, Michael Codron, to take it on. By July, it was obvious the unnamed trilogy was going to be a huge success in Scarborough, and on the 2nd of August, the stage newspaper reported Codron had bought it and hoped to stage it the following year in London. Now, there's nothing in archive to back this assertion up. Later that same week, Peggy told Alan Codron had only just read the plays, and there is no mention of contracts until the 31st of August, soon after which Codron decided to take on the trilogy for the West End. What happened next is not quite clear, although it left an indelible impression on Alan Ayckbourn. Near the end of the run, Michael Codron, my regular producer, rather reluctantly agreed to produce all three. Jubilation! A few weeks later, he withdrew the offer, having had second thoughts, deeming the venture too big a risk. I went home to tell my partner. It is one of the few occasions when I have known her really angry. This appears to be backed up in correspondence from September, imploring Alan to have lunch with Codron. The implication seemingly being that Alan has been ignoring correspondence from both his agent and his London producer. There were inquiries from other producers, of course there were, but they were either impractical or for just one of the plays. Alan was determined it was a trilogy or nothing. Despondent at the turn of events, Alan, having told Peggy she could burn her copies of the scripts if she needed the shelf space, then heard from his West End collaborator, Eric Thompson. And then, serendipity. Eric Thompson, my regular London director, rang me up and said, "If you don't hear from me for a couple of days, I'm going in for a minor operation for my leg. Have you got anything for me to read?" And I said, "Yes, I've got plenty for you to read. The Norman Conquests." He read them and then he rang me up and said, "Fantastic, I love them. We'll find someone to do them." Having explained the ongoing situation with Codron, Eric suggested they approach the Greenwich Theatre about staging the trilogy. Alan agreed and let Peggy know, who was still keen to bring Codron on board and kept him in the loop. Alan and Eric met the artistic director of Greenwich Theatre, Ewan Hooper, over lunch and sold him on the idea of a trilogy. According to Alan, the three of them came up with an ideal cast of Tom Courtenay, Michael Gambon, Felicity Kendall, Penelope Keith, Mark Kingston and Penelope Wilton. However, Codron's biography suggests he was also significantly involved with the casting, and, judging by later developments, this appears accurate. By early December, a rep contract was being negotiated for the trilogy at Greenwich, and, crucially, Peggy revealed no London management was currently involved, the hope being the Greenwich production would attract interest in a West End transfer. It all then gets a little clandestine. With the play contracted for a rep run at Greenwich, i.e. the theatre could not transfer it to the West End, Codron re-entered the frame and offered to underwrite the costs of rehearsing in London. According to Peggy, Greenwich Theatre was upset by this, and this led to a curious letter. On 29th of January, Peggy wrote that Codron had now agreed to take on the play for the West End and that contracts were being drawn up, but crucially, Codron must not appear to be involved in the Greenwich production. The implication appears to be that Codron was shrewdly going to transfer the entire production into the West End, but that this wasn't to be made public in case Greenwich asked Codron for more financial involvement. While the actual motives and reason for all this are unclear from the material held in the Ayckbourn Archive, Codron's contract undoubtedly strengthened the chance of securing the desired acting talent and company, given Eric Thompson, knowing of Codron's involvement, could imply there was a future for the trilogy in the West End after Greenwich. With 2 contracts in place, work began on staging the trilogy, which finally had a name. In January 1974, Alan decided the trilogy would be called The Norman Conquests. On 24th of January, the Evening Standard announced The Norman Conquests was coming to Greenwich Theatre. This is the first recorded public use of the trilogy title. The trilogy began 6 weeks of rehearsal in March, starting with what Alan dubbed the longest read-through of all time, some 6 hours. Eric Thompson directed, but unusually, Alan was also on hand, which is interesting as Alan received no production credit in either Greenwich or the West End, yet he undoubtedly played a significant role. It was a very good relationship because in rehearsals we were Little E and Big Al, Little Eric and Big Alan, and he'd say when we got to one of the set pieces, like the seating of the dinner party in Table Manners, "Well now, we're going to the dinner party. Before we block this, Al, take it away." And I'd say, "Right, Tom sits there and then he gets up and he moves over here and so and so." And I'd say, "Thank you very much." And I'd sit down again. I did the same in all 3 plays, all the set pieces. The Norman Conquests opened at the Greenwich Theatre on 9th of May 1974 and was an immediate success. Not that Alan and Eric realised this, due to an unfortunate incident. On the first night, Eric was so terrified he sat in the dressing room and asked me to join him. We listened to the tannoy, which went dead. I was convinced that the plays hadn't worked. In fact, the laughter had blown the tannoy. Believing the play had failed, Alan left the theatre at the interval to go for a walk in the nearby park, which was closed for the night. He returned to discover the press officer had been searching for him to tell him there had been a fantastic response to the show. The Norman Conquests was a phenomenal hit for Greenwich, and it wasn't long before questions about a West End transfer began to be asked. This was duly reported on the 20th of June, with some newspapers even writing there'd been a bidding war for the rights for the transfer before they had been won by Codron. This was nonsense, of course. Codron had had the West End rights sewn up since January. The trilogy closed at the Greenwich Theatre on the 29th of June. Remarkably, this was also the first time ever all 3 plays were performed on a single day. They reopened at the Globe Theatre on the 1st of August, featuring the original company with the exception of Penelope Wilton, who was committed to another project and had been replaced by Bridget Turner. Although the programme noted this production was first presented at the Greenwich Theatre on 9th of May 1974, there was no other mention of the company, and it was, to all intents and purposes, a Michael Codron production. The trilogy would run until 13th of March 1976, which included a change of venue from the Globe, now the Gielgud, to the Apollo, and a change of cast which saw the first appearance of Julia Mackenzie in a major Ayckbourn production. She would go on to an award-winning performance as Susan in the West End premiere of Alan Ayckbourn's Woman in Mind. The trilogy would win the Evening Standard and Plays and Players Best Play Awards. The Norman Conquests transferred to Broadway in 1975 and became a mainstay of theatres. It continues to be frequently produced, and the Old Vic's 2008 revival and New York transfer won more awards than any other previous production of an Ayckbourn play. As for the playwright, well, he's always had a slight antipathy to the trilogy. He believed the reviews had been far too complimentary and that, in his own words, the only way was down. He would frequently reiterate these thoughts. Look at the Norman Conquests, grossly overpraised, by no means my best work as was claimed. One suspects Alan has a complex relationship with the trilogy, given it was so successful and propelled him to new heights of fame. He's always expressed more of a fondness for his plays which he believes were overlooked or misjudged by the critics, such as Joking Apart and Absent Friends, rather than the ones which took care of themselves. What cannot be disputed is that in the Norman Conquests, Alan Ayckbourn created one of the most significant works of late 20th century British theatre and one of his own most memorable and popular works. I hope you've enjoyed our trip into the West End with the Norman Conquests. Watch out for more Spotlight soon, and please don't forget to subscribe.